it's very important then that John and Tej respond to Bob's assailing of the poem as controlling, if you like.
I disagree. I don't find it smug at all. I don't find his attitude in the second part of the poem smug. He gives the neighbor the last word.
That was the speaker, not Frost. The speaker of the poem might not be smug.
Now we get to the debate portion of the program.
I'd like to naively posit that this is Frost. Who cares? Come on.
That just undercuts eons of pedagogy.
I know.
Yes,
but just for sort of telegraphic purposes.
P-E-R-E-L-M-A-N, Bob Perlman. You can find his books at bookstores everywhere.
Yeah.
He's the guy who
Postmodernism for Dummies, etc.
Right. And Frost did say, "I'm both the wall builder and the wall destroyer." I mean, he's taking responsibility for being both these characters, which of course
but he's not the neighbor.
He did say, "I am both the neighbor and
saying
the
it's an alter ego, Bob."
No, but the wall builder is the playful.
That's the speaker,
right? But the wall destroyer
isn't necessarily the neighbor.
Is Frost.
It's Frost. Is nature.
Frost.
And he puts together nature, play, Frost. You know, that's the winning team, and the losing team
is the neighbor.
Stone Age. Stone Age.
Here comes John. Here comes John.
I think that makes this poem altogether too programmatic.
Or anti-programmatic or something.
No, that it's saying that the speaker chooses a winner and a loser.
Yeah, I disagree.
And I think that in the end, we don't know what is won or lost. These guys still have to build this wall back up.
They don't have to.
No, yes, they do.
They do because it's a ritual, and you don't want to mess up.
And if you have a stone wall and you're a farmer, you do this 4 times a year. You do it seasonally, and one of you is going to call the other up. You're right that there's no God taking him by the scruff of the neck and throwing him down in the field, but they're going to do it. It's something they're going to do. So, you know, I think what he's doing...
And you want to live in a society in which...
Yes. Spectacled men rule.
Men rule. Men rule,
Put
right.
on my glasses here.
Listen,
Rachel, here she comes back.
No, I want to back off because I think we're now too much inside the narrative of the poem, and we're playing a game inside that narrative.
Is it a game with a net or without a net?
Yeah. I shouldn't have used that word. My bad. See, I'd say that in light of if you're inside the characters of the poem, you're inside the poem. There's here, and you're like looking at the neighbor and the I figure. In light of the superior smugness of his desire to colonize his neighbor, even if the apples are not going to, I'd say that it's good fences make good neighbors is a very reasonable thing to say. However, in a more, that is, I'm kind of saying I don't quite see it the way Bob does because I'm playing with the narrative in a certain way. Here's what I would say very simply, but it's quite a hard thing to wrap around because you're always inside the poem when you're a reader. You're sort of like playing inside with the other people. But what I would say is that if you look at the characters and the pronouns and the figures and the stuff inside the narrative events, that's one thing. Like I and he, or we, or the hunters, and all those people running around inside the poem. And then the outside of the poem is like the speaker, the imagined speaker of the text, and the whole thing on the page, the material text. And the problem is, in many poems, like Frost's humanist poems, the speaker of the text is the I, and there's a speaker called I inside the poem, and they've merged in your mind. And it's very, very hard to see this coolly, because the poem doesn't want you to see it coolly. The poem wants to merge, it's a double place of the I. Speaker of the text, I'm sort of saying this, all this, the I inside the poem, and there's a little clue because there's a double monologue. It's a dramatic monologue, but it has a quoted interior monologue of the person's in the head talk in little mini quotation marks inside the poem. Okay, but then there's a further outside, and what I would say this is like the poet, not the I speaking, who is only ever using part of herself or himself in writing any poem. No poet, no person can possibly get all of herself into a thing written. There's always stuff that doesn't get in, right? So it's what the poet announces of himself in this creation. And this is the nearest figure to a real person. we call it Frost. But inside the poem, and this is where Frost puns an offense and something there is as frost and little puns in the poem. He wants to confuse that issue. He wants a series of continuous I figures in this poem that you read, as we've been doing. But I would like to sort of put the brakes on and just consider the question that the characters inside the poem, the thing that's sort of trying to say the poem, and Frost, the actual historical writer of the poem, might be different. It's very hard to keep these things apart. That's all I can say.